Welcome to the Spokes Holyrood Hustings, our spring public meeting. I'd like to start by thanking the people who've organised the meeting. There's a lot of people involved, and the group coordinators, etc. But special thanks to Martin McDonnell, who's been the main organiser and coordinator for the meeting. The meeting is being videoed by Bryce at the front, but only the speeches are going to be videoed. We're going to be splitting into groups later on. That will not be videoed. And then we'll have some final summing up speeches, which again will be videoed. If you're tweeting about the meeting, please use the hashtag SpokesMTG, which is short for Spokes Meeting. And if you do a blog about the meeting, send us the link. Now, we're holding our spring public meeting as at Hustings because of the Holyrood elections coming up. So obviously, what we're interested in tonight is decisions where MSPs can have an effect. That is national issues more than local issues, although it may be that some local issues come up in some of the groups, but we want to stick to national issues as far as possible. And by way of setting the scene, I'd like to mention 3 current national issues which Spokes considers are extremely important and which we hope will get discussed in the groups. The first issue, and in fact, just to mention, you'll find more about these in the Spokes Bulletin and in the Spokes Worker, which are on your chairs. The first issue is that of cycling investment. And Spokes has got a reputation for always praising what is good before we come on to pointing out what still needs to be done. So in terms of funding, I'd like to start by acknowledging that during the current Parliament, funding for cycling has doubled. On the other hand, it has doubled from 1% of transport spending to 2%. So that means that 40 million a year is now invested in cycling and walking, which compares to 800 million a year goes into trunk roads. And under the government's plans in the next Parliament, there will also be 125 million a year from cutting airport air duty tax. So that is basically a subsidy from the government to air travel. Spokes is part of the Walk, Cycle, Vote campaign, and we very much share with them the number 1 objective, which is that by the end of the next Parliament, 10% of the transport budget should be allocated to walking and cycling. And as an Edinburgh-based organisation, I think we can say that if Edinburgh Council can do that, and it is, then so can the Scottish Parliament.
Yeah. Hear, hear.
I was hoping for a clap there, so thank you. The second national issue I'd like to mention is slightly, possibly sounds obscure, but it's really vital, and that is government funding to local authorities. This is the revenue funding which is used for everyday council expenditure. I'm not talking about the money that goes to cycle projects or infrastructure, but everyday expenditure. And so that's, for example, the money that goes into filling up of potholes. And in the recent Scottish budget, this grant to local authorities, the revenue expenditure, was cut very drastically. It was one of the biggest cuts in the whole Scottish budget. But not only does it affect things like potholes, perhaps even more important, it affects staffing. So Edinburgh Council, for example, is going to be losing 2,000 staff. And obviously, that level of staff cuts affects every department. And it's going to affect the structure of the cycling team, just as one example. And we've already heard, for example, that one of the experienced cycle staff in the council has opted for voluntary redundancy, which most staff are being offered. So there could be quite serious problems in implementing projects in the future. And then the third national issue is the question of bike rail. And again, starting with positivity, a great deal is going to be done and has started to be done for bike parking at stations. My own station of Linlithgow actually happened last week, and what originally were 5 spaces for cars are now 72 covered spaces for bikes, which is pretty fantastic. And in addition to that, there's going to be bike hire at some 15 or 20 stations in the next year or so. But whilst that's the good side, the bad side is bike carriage, as you'll know if you've been reading Spoke's material recently. The West Highland line, where at the moment you've got 6 bookable bike spaces, that's going to go down with the new refurbished trains to 2 bookable spaces, although there will also be 2 unbookable spaces if the wheelchair space is not used. And on the Edinburgh-Glasgow line, the trains are being lengthened considerably when the new trains come in, and yet provision for bikes is, if anything, going to be worse than it is at the moment. The fault, I know a lot of people blame Abellio, the new franchisees, but the real fault lies with Transport Scotland, the government transport agency, because when they set up the franchise, instead of saying that new and refurbished trains should have at least as many spaces as existing, they said that each train should have a minimum of 2 spaces. So in some of the trains that seems to be taken as the aim. So those are 3 of the issues that we very much hope will come up in the discussion groups. And these are decisions which the people that you elect will be able to have a say on. So we're very honoured to have these 5 amazing speakers beside me, 3 of whom are current MSPs, and quite amazingly, all 3 of them are co-conveners of the Scottish Parliament Cross-Party Cycling Group. And all of them have been very active in promoting the cause of cycling during the last Parliament. And I would like to say that although what's in party manifestos is incredibly important, what is also very important is having individual MSPs from whatever party who are proactive on cycling. And I think we have seen that very much in the last Parliament. You may, possibly one of the 2 of the speakers will mention things that they have as individuals have done. So we're very pleased to welcome Sarah Boyack, Labour, one of the 3 co-conveners, Alison Johnson, Green, and Jim Eadie, SNP. And these have all been great champions of cycling, regardless of party. For the Conservatives, unfortunately, Councillor Nick Cook couldn't come tonight. He is the Conservative spokesperson on transport on Edinburgh Council. So Sandy Batho has volunteered to come in and take his place. Sandy's also a candidate in the election. If Councillor Cook had been here, I was going to say, well, I'll say it anyway. We don't always agree with the Conservatives on Edinburgh Council in terms of their votes on budgets. But one thing I will say for them, and Councillor Cook in particular, he's been a real champion of Edinburgh Council getting a bike share scheme going. So if by any chance he is elected, maybe we'll see a bike share station down at Holyrood. Emma Farling-Sykes is here for the Lib Dems. Emma has not been elected to anything either, as yet, but her compatriot, well, at least as a Lib Dem councillor, used to be Councillor Gordon Mackenzie. And Councillor Mackenzie was chair of the Transport Committee until the Lib Dem wipeouts a few years ago. But Councillor Mackenzie has got a very big place in our hearts, because he was the person, when he was chair of the Transport Committee, who introduced Edinburgh Council's policy of a percentage going towards cycling. And that has really proved a tremendous thing. Edinburgh is now a leader amongst all councils in the whole of Britain in that respect. So if Emma is elected, we're hoping that she'll be pressing for something similar at Holyrood. So I think that's enough from me. All the speakers are now going to have 5 minutes, and after 4 minutes I'll give them a warning bell. And it's up to, we've left it completely free. They don't have to comment on the points I've made, but they're going to tell us their view on cycling, and if they want to put it in the wider transport context, if they've got time, that's fine. So drawn lots, and I think number 1 is Sandy for the Conservatives.